Welcome to the Stronger Than Steel podcast with your host, Austin Davidson and John Keir, talking Steelers all the time. Now, here's Austin and John.
Hello and welcome back to another edition of the Stronger Than Steel podcast. My name is John Keir, and joining me as always is my co-host Austin Davidson.
Yeah.
Welcome back to the show, Austin. It is January 8th. We are just a couple of days away from Steelers and Browns in the wild card round of the NFL playoffs. But before we get to that, we have a game to recap and several games to look at as we wrap up the final regular season week of the 2020 NFL season. And a game that did not have a lot on the line for the Pittsburgh Steelers. But nonetheless, there were some solid performances against a team in the Cleveland Browns that needed to win to get into the playoffs, and ultimately the Browns were able to win by a final score of 24-22. And overall, early on, I didn't get to see a ton of this game, but early on it seemed like this game had the potential to get out of hand. But the boys rallied and they played a relatively good game. And, all things considered, I guess, coming out of a loss, I didn't feel too bad about it.
Yeah, there was a bunch to like. And, I mean, it's the backups going into team starters for the most part. I know the Browns had a few COVID cases, so it does play into it that there were a few backups for the Browns in that will likely be playing next week. But overall, I feel pretty good coming out of this.
Yes, indeed. So why don't we get to some housekeeping news first, starting with injuries, and because that's the biggest part of the outcome of this game, is that with not much on the line for the Steelers, the biggest concern was getting out of Cleveland healthy. And for the most part, the Steelers did. Mike Tomlin said after the game that there were no major or significant injuries to be reported of from First Energy Stadium. That being said, there were a handful of players that were dinged up, starting with inside linebacker Vince Williams. He injured his quad and left the game for a short period of time. He did log a full practice on Thursday, which is now yesterday at the time we're recording, so he should be good to go. Inside linebacker Marcus Allen also left the game for a while with a wrist injury. He was not on the injury report, so it's possible he just bruised it. And wide receiver Chase Claypool appeared to injure his lower leg, but he was able to re-enter the game and also is not on this upcoming playoff week's injury report. So, all in all, the biggest objective from this game was to get out healthy, and it looks like the Steelers have done that.
Yeah, it's a victory in itself. As long as none of the Steelers got hurt majorly, which Vince was scary for. Like, it wasn't a scary injury to watch, but it was like him not re-entering the game felt bad at the time, but it made sense. They're like, well, we don't want to risk hurting you more, and he seems to be okay. I'm sure he's going to push to play even if he is injured in a playoff game. So,
right. So, going into this game, there were a lot of reasons to think that the Browns would have the upper hand in this one, and even though they ultimately came away with the victory, handing the Steelers their fourth loss of the season, like we said off the top, the Steelers played relatively well in some aspects, even though the start of the game probably was not where a lot of people wanted it to be. The Steelers, again, for I think the seventh straight game, did not score any points in the first quarter. And what's nuts about it all is they actually managed to get a first down on the opening drive and before they ended up punting, and that felt like a victory in itself because the Steelers' offense has been 3 and out basically to start every game here lately. This is the first time that they actually made a little progress, even though it only ended up being 24 yards. But that's just the low bar that this offense has set when it comes out of the gate.
yeah, it's pretty bad that we're looking forward to just getting a first down rather than. We're not even talking about getting into field goal range. We're not talking about getting to midfield. We literally just have to hope for something more than a 3 and out, which they didn't even get to midfield. They were 1 yard short on that play, but yeah, we're grasping at straws here for the offense.
Yeah, and going forward, this is something that has to get better if the Steelers are going to be able to go on any sort of run. And we'll get into the quarterback play in this one, but a lot of the offense was at least somewhat different, And I think a lot of that could be attributed to the fact that there was a different quarterback, but one thing that was constant was the bad start from the Steelers' offense. So, going back the last 7 games, the Steelers have scored only 14 points in the first quarter, and both of them have come off of pick sixes from Joe Hayden and Robert Spillane. And there's a ton of issues with it, but getting out to a fast start is hugely important. And the Steelers have only scored an opening drive touchdown once in their last 2 full seasons, which is just crazy to think about, especially considering one of those seasons had Ben Roethlisberger at the helm for 15 of the 16 games, and yet the only game in which they've done that was the Titans game. And I think they scored back-to-back touchdowns to open that game, too.
Yeah, it's been pretty pathetic for the offense for the most part coming into games. I feel like that's a lot on Fiechner, at least for the opening drive. I feel like the opening drive has to do with script a lot more than performance in that regard. It's obviously a combination of both, but the opening is where I put a lot of blame on Fiechner, because those are the drives that you literally have scripted, and you're like, this is what we're going to go into the game doing, especially if you start out on offense where you don't know what the other team is going to give you yet. I just think that a lot of that does fall on Fiechner. Execution needs to be better, but, you know.
Yeah, the first 10 to 15 plays, give or take, are scripted by the offensive coordinator and ultimately Ben Roethlisberger for the most part. But again, poor execution at the start of this game as well. And it didn't help that the other side of the ball, the Steelers' defense, was getting gashed early on by the Browns' ground game. 6 plays, 85 yards on their opening drive, including a double explosive Nick Chubb 47-yard touchdown run. And at that moment, you thought the game might be already getting out of hand. Because the Browns, even though this was a game against a lot of Steelers backups, you would have been hoping that the Steelers would have had a better opportunity to shut down one of the better rushing offenses in the NFL this year, but to no avail on that first drive. What did you think was the issue there? Was it just the fact that it was backups, or did you think that is it as simple as the Browns are just that good?
I think it was just more of it being backups. I mean, I thought that the touchdown was a lot on a starter. I thought that was a big ad for Minkah Fitzpatrick. Like, you don't like to see that. His tackling has been sort of an issue so far through the season, so it's something to pay attention to, and he's a big reason that that touchdown was able to happen. I mean, I really didn't have a problem. I felt like most of the problems were because of the backups playing. I do want to point out that Alex Highsmith started the game with 3 straight tackles. He got the first 3 tackles of the game. He split one, I think, with Avery Williamson, but still, he was all over the field in this game for a guy playing outside linebacker. So I just wanted to point that out there. But even though that they were driving Alex Highsmith, they were either targeting Alex Highsmith, so that's either a bad thing, or he's just playing around the ball, which is a good thing.
So the teams exchanged punts, and then the Browns went down the field, scored a field goal to make it 10-0, and we finally saw the Steelers' offense awake about 5 minutes into the second quarter. They got on the board with the field goal of their own, and a big part of that drive was a 41-yard pass from Mason Rudolph to Deontay Johnson over the top, and that was kind of my big point in this game, was talking about the fact that for the second straight game, or at least for the six straight quarters, at least it seemed like, the Steelers were pushing the ball downfield again, and this time with Mason Rudolph. So we can talk about the differences between him and Ben, but one of the big criticisms of Rudolph from his 2019 season was the fact that he wasn't pushing the ball down the field enough. And in this game, I think we saw some growth from him in that area, and we can get into his game in more detail in a little bit, but this was one area where I wasn't expecting to see such major improvement, and his willingness to go down the field, I think, really helped out at the end of the day.
Yeah, and not to mention that was a really pretty pass. That was put in a really good spot for him, giving Deontay Johnson a chance, and I think that he is doing better. I think there's a little bit more confidence from him to push the ball downfield, because what I really was looking for was not even just down the field. I was looking for intermediate and deep middle. I feel like targeting the middle of the field was the biggest problem, Mason Rudolph. That wasn't short, because that's what I felt like him and Devlin Hodges always took. And what I saw in this game was a lot of a lot more of that. He targeted the intermediate middle a few times. He targeted intermediate deep once, more than once actually. But I think that he's grown at least a little bit, and I was saying that he hadn't really grown yet, and I think it was a little bit premature from the 24 snaps he played. But the only problem that he looks to still have is the pocket presence. He has no pocket field whatsoever. The Steelers only gave up 1 sack on the day, but Mason Rudolph had no idea it was coming. That seems to be the biggest problem he has remaining. Not that he's I consider him a great quarterback, but it's one of his biggest problems. If you know what I'm saying.
Rudolph was 7 of 15 on the day on passes that traveled more than 10 yards down the field, including 1 touchdown and 1 interception. But to get to your point about his biggest issue being pocket presence, yeah, I don't know if I felt like it was better in this game. Maybe it was by a little bit, but I mean, if you want to circle his 2 worst plays, where if he doesn't make those 2 plays, the Steelers probably win. Number 1, which is less of a big deal, was the sack he took from Olivier Vernon, the Browns' edge rusher. I mean, we all saw that play. Rudolph has plenty of time. Okorafor hits his block, ends up on the ground. Vernon has enough time to get up, chase Rudolph, and then if he really wanted to, he probably could have focused more on actually stripping the ball, trying to rip it from him, because Rudolph just never saw him coming. He was like a deer in the headlights.
Yeah. Vernon was probably surprised that he didn't even get the ball off yet, that he was able to get up off the ground and still pass rush. That's likely why we didn't see him go for the ball, because he was probably sure that he was probably just about to get it off with how long it took. But yeah, that was not a very good play from Rudolph for sure.
And you see young quarterbacks make those kinds of mistakes a lot, but I think you're hoping that he plays better there in the sense that that clock has to go off at some point. You can't stand there and take hits when you're not a mobile quarterback. You just have to be able to process a little faster. And I don't know if this is something that can get a lot better, but it's clearly the biggest issue for him right now, because what we saw from this past game, I think, proved once and for all that he does have the arm talent to make the throws in the NFL. And he's not the most mobile guy in the NFL, but he at least, he's not a big extend the play guy, but in a pinch, he can at least roll out. He's definitely more mobile than Ben Roethlisberger, although that's not a high bar to clear. I think we learned a lot more about him positively than negatively, but that sack was obviously a major negative, and then the interception as well was not very good either.
Yeah, the interception was bad. He threw a bad ball under pressure that he should have never thrown, and that basically gave the Browns the game because they were able to score the touchdown on the very next play. So the interception was bad, but other than those 2 plays, he actually played pretty decently.
Yeah, that play was kind of, from what I could tell, was kind of like a whole bunch of crap happening at once. It seems as though Benny Snell probably didn't do his best job in picking up a blitz, and of course Rudolph has to know sometimes it's okay to eat it, but he chose not to, and as a result it turned into probably the biggest play of the game, that turnover that led to what would become the game-winning score there. So, I mean, all things considered, I thought he played pretty well, but those 2 blemishes are things that are hard to ignore. And, it's only 1 game, but I know you kind of alluded to it already, but where are you on Mason Rudolph right now?
He's okay. I don't view him as a starter, but I do think he's okay. The one thing to consider is that the Browns' secondary was the most messed up part of their team coming into this game. They're missing quite a few pieces there, their best pieces with Denzel Ward and stuff. They also didn't have their starting safeties for a good amount of this game. So I don't take this game with a grain of salt. I think he showed improvement compared to last year. However, I just still think that Rudolph is still just a solid backup kind of player. I don't think that he is the Steelers' future, personally. You probably need more time.
Could you envision a scenario where he's a bridge starter for someone else?
I could. I mean, I'm an advocate for waiting for the guy if there's not a guy in the draft, because there's not always going to be the guy in the draft. You're not always going to have the 2004 draft class or the leave 2017 one with Watson and Mahomes. You're not going to always have that. So if there's not someone that the Steelers like when Ben Roethlisberger's gone and Mason Rudolph is willing to come back on a smaller deal, then I could see it.
Rudolph in Week 17 graded as the fifth best passer by PFF standards. So definitely the best game of his career. Set a career high in passing yards. On the day, I think he acquitted himself well and didn't silence his critics, but he at least gave his career, kind of validated himself after all the struggles he had last year, especially in that building, because that was where the crap hit the fan, for lack of a better term. That was just the low point of his career, and this point he was able to turn right around a year later and play his best game, and I think that shows a lot for his mental fortitude as well.
Oh, yeah. The Steelers are 5-2-1 in the last 8 games against the Browns, and those 2 losses came against when Mason Rudolph was playing, so he has really struggled against the Browns. I mean, what's it called? Wasn't able to get the victory here, but he definitely grew, and he was close. He was pretty close to bringing this back for the Steelers. That onside kick at the end, I know we haven't gotten there yet. The onside kick was really, really close.
Yeah, it really was. But, I mean, we'll get to that in a little bit. But, yeah, just overall, I left feeling impressed by his play, and so far everything that we've seen from statistics and metrics would back that up. Let's talk a little bit about the other quarterback, Josh Dobbs, who was brought in for a short yardage package where he was able to technically throw a few passes, run the ball a couple of times and hand it off, and it worked with some relative success in this game, and that's something that I think was huge considering how bad the Steelers have been, especially in short yardage this year, that we finally got to see something new from the Steelers offense, a new wrinkle, and not only was it just something new that they tried, but it also worked pretty well.
Yeah, he was 4 for 5 in the air, which it only went for 2 yards, but and the one miss was probably one of the best plays of the day for the offense in terms of the difference it made. If Dobbs didn't get that incompletion off, that was a sack for minus 15 yards because Dobbs had gone backwards. So him getting that ball off was really impressive. But I liked how the Steelers used him in this game. They kind of used him like a Taysom Hill or probably closer to a Jacoby Brissett, because they didn't try throwing to Dobbs or anything, but they used him like Jacoby Brissett, brought him in for a few packages, and he ran pretty well. He is a mobile quarterback after all, so it makes sense to use him like that in a game like this. So I really like seeing that. It was interesting to see.
Yeah, Dobbs is never going to light the world on fire with his speed, but he's also clearly the most mobile of the quarterbacks the Steelers have. He ran a 4.64 at the Combine back in 2017. So he has ability, and I think that it was a welcome wrinkle, and I'm curious to see now as we shift our attention to the game against the Browns this upcoming week, do you think there's a possibility that we see the Steelers have 3 quarterbacks active? I know we've talked a little bit about this off air.
I think they do, but I kind of hope not. I really wish that they save us for the playoffs instead, because do you remember that game against the Bengals where we just ran the Wildcat with Jalen Samuels and it worked every time for no reason?
I do. I was at that game.
Oh yeah, duh. I forgot. That's kind of what I think of. It's where did this come from? The team had no idea what to do. Why? But it was great. And so now I know you kind of have to battle test it in practice. That's what you practice for. I think it's really cool, but the Browns are not going to let them that happen again. They had no idea that was happening, and we used it in a what's it called? A non-important game for us. So now they're going to the week practicing well, this is a possibility now. So I doubt it's going to be anywhere near as effective as it was in this game. So I kind of hope to not see it, but it could be brought in there if they think that they know a way to expose it. I hope it's kind of put away.
There's several degrees of which you could go to do this. You could end up not making Dobbs active, and then the defense knows to only prepare for Ben. Or you could make Dobbs active but don't use him, or you could make him active and use him. I'll tell you what, I'm not completely against him being used in this game because the Steelers have just been so bad. The worst team in the NFL in terms of short yardage, third and fourth and short, the last 2 seasons. And I think the fact that he helped, it doesn't mean that he'll play well and it'll happen again. But I really want to see the Steelers try to do something different because what we've seen from them short yardage-wise on offense prior to this past week has just been absolutely atrocious. And normally I wouldn't say to continue with something gimmicky, but I think that if you make them practice for it, you should at least try it once just to see if they really did practice it as well as they maybe say that they did. Now, the other thing to say is that, well, you're taking your Hall of Fame quarterback off the field, Austin, and that's where trouble always lies because what happens if Josh Dobbs fumbles a snap or something like that, or there's some sort of miscommunication on a read option between him and James Conner, and then he fumbles in a critical moment of the game. I think there's some upside to it, but the dangers of it backfiring are quite extreme.
Yeah, and we kind of saw it, like I said, on that one incompletion he had. That was almost drastic. That was almost, I wouldn't say apocalyptic, but it was almost really bad when he got sacked for like somewhere near a 10-yard loss. But he got it off. But that could have gone a lot differently if the Browns defender was just better. Realistically, that wasn't Josh Dobbs being amazing. That was the Browns defender really struggling to get Dobbs down. It's just there is concerns for me with using this a lot. And again, the element of surprise is gone. They're 100% at least going to try practicing for it.
Let me also point out that if we were not playing the Browns, I wouldn't think about using this. I would just think about using it for this game.
See, I don't know. I feel like if the Steelers make it farther along and they don't use it in this game, they could bring it back in another game later.
Well, they certainly could. I think it's more likely that they try to do it again now, is what I'm saying. Because that's what happened. That's what happened when we played the Patriots in 2018 with that whole Jalen Samuels toss counter thing, and it worked really well. And then in Week 1 against the Patriots, we ran it like 7 times, and it didn't work at any of those 7 times.
Yeah, because they were ready for it.
Yeah, exactly. So, where else? Offensive line. Solid day. I mean, why don't we start with the running game? I know they didn't put up eye-popping numbers, but they had 12 of 19 running back runs were deemed successful. They averaged 4.3 yards per carry on 20 totes, and, you know, even though it wasn't sexy, it got the job done for the most part. And considering the low bar we've had for this running game, the fact that they had probably the best game of the last couple of months, I think, is very encouraging going forward, even if it's going to be quite hard to do again.
Yeah, this was encouraging. This is kind of what we wanted from the game. There was not crazy numbers, but we got the successful run rates we want, which is like over 50%, and 60% is like
gravy.
Ideal. 60% would be great, yeah. I think that was good, and part of that was Josh Dobbs' running because, you know, he ran for a 13-yard gain and a 7-yard gain. But overall, the running game was really good, and I like the use of the running backs, too. I was an advocate coming off of last game of using James Conner more in passing situations, and we saw that again this game. He was targeted 8 times, and he caught 5 of them for 25. He had a drop that almost got intercepted, which it would have been really bad. But other than that, I'm an advocate for using it. It's like an extension of the run game to me, is how they use James Conner, and that's what I like. I like having that threat that Conner might catch the ball instead of running it. So I was a fan of how the running backs were used in this game. I thought the running game was much better in terms of successful run rates in this game, and that's essentially all I hope for going forward.
And that's what we were complaining a lot with the route tree Juju Smith-Schuster was running before, where he was basically running the routes Conner was running, and his yards per catch has gone up not a ton, but it's gone up a little bit the last couple weeks as James Conner's become more involved in the passing game. And I think it's quite clear that Conner is the Steelers' best running back. I mean, where are we on all these running backs right now? Because Conner is set to leave at the end of the season. I don't imagine he'll be back. But all the other running backs on the team are either not good or have question marks.
Yeah, I don't know how to feel. I feel like Benny Snell might be the best option going forward. But they're going to split him with Anthony McFarland. It threatens what he's good at with him being a warm-up kind of guy. Like, he warms up over time and then gets better when he's force-fed the snaps, as we talked about last week. It can't happen if you're splitting time with other backs. Also, do you have the patience to sit with Benny Snell for him to warm up? It's not like he's Derrick Henry, where it's like, okay, we know we have a really great running back when we get going. It's not like that with Benny Snell. It's like, yeah, we might get a guy hot if we get him going. So I don't know how to feel.
And not to mention, on top of that, his short yardage running has not been as advertised.
Not at all. Just hope we get like a cheap running back in free agency. Some guy, might be better with a better offensive line if we could get a offensive line going into next year.
What about McFarland and Samuels?
Samuels is just not very good in general. He's a jack of all trades but master of none. I think you've called that description for. And then McFarland, I don't really have an opinion on yet. He hasn't really gotten that many snaps. He looks explosive, but he's never ripped off one. I keep watching, and he lets gaps close, and I'm like, just hit it, just go. You got the speed, and it's like he's so close that he gets like a hand touching him, and he goes down. So I don't want to judge him too much because he hasn't played that much, but I do wish that he was a little bit more elusive or just able to break like a hand tackle, which it feels like he hasn't.
Yeah, McFarland has a total of 89 snaps this year and just 34 being carries. So he's had basically one huge game of carries this year. And his season high came back in week 3 against Houston.
Yeah. It's just not a lot to go off of right now, currently.
Would you consider drafting a running back day 3?
Yeah. That's where you get the bread and butter running backs. I'd consider it. I feel like the team has a lot of other options, but day 3, a lot of other positions they could fill. But day 3, if there's like a guy that you're in love with, sure, go for it. A lot of good guys have gone day 3. I feel like there's my argument always. It's just that there's always a great running back at a school that is going to fall. I really wonder where Patterson is going to go from Buffalo. Like is he declaring for this year's draft, or is he like next year, or neither?
I believe he's going to go to the NFL draft. Let me figure that out for you.
Well, that's a guy that's not a day 3 pick. He is 100% going before day 3. But it's just like he's a third round guy. But like guys like that fall because they're at such like they're in the MAC. But there's guys like that. Kareem Hunt was like that and Kareem Hunt was amazing. He was I think a 5th round pick. Maybe I'm wrong on that. But regardless, it's just how I feel is that every team has a great running back almost. It's in college it feels like, oh, here's a really good running back, here's a really good running back, here's a really good running back, here's a really good running back. The difference between the top ones and the bottom ones in a draft are like so minimal. It's basically what conference are you playing for? That's how we're going to judge you. What conference are you in? Who did you go against? Who were your big games against? And you're going to find a guy at Illinois State, he goes undrafted free, disgusting numbers, broke every record in Illinois ever, basically, and is amazing. And that's James Robinson. James Robinson, an undrafted free agent guy, could have been a day 3 pick, but could have went in round 7. But he was even less. He was undrafted free agent, despite putting up amazing, groundbreaking numbers. There was questions that if he could do it in a bigger conference, because Illinois State isn't a powerhouse in the Power 10. But, that's just how I feel. It's really like that. You just got to be able to look through, does this guy have a skill set to be, could he have done that at Alabama? Could he have done that at Clemson? Could he have been able to find, does he have good vision? Is he showing things that would translate to a bigger conference or to the NFL? It's all about how you can evaluate the players, I feel like, with running back, because every team is a good running back.
Patterson, by the way, for Buffalo, is going to the NFL draft. He just finished his junior season, 6 games, 1,000 yards, and 19 touchdowns. Finished his career with 52 rushing touchdowns, which is a touchdown on approximately every 13 rushes. And one thing to note is that he did only catch 20 passes in his collegiate career, 0 in his junior season.
So that's a guy that'll likely go 3rd, 4th round despite putting up groundbreaking numbers. I don't know. I'll have to, once we get to draft season, I'll be able to tell where the running backs stand more because I basically know nothing other than names to this point. I have not watched Jerome Patterson. All I know is he's disgusting, but from all the people that watch him at Buffalo, and I've seen his stats, I've seen how much rushing touchdowns he got in that one game. I know that's a guy that's going to fall. I know Najee Harris because people are already putting him to the Steelers. I know Etienne, I think that's how you pronounce it. I think he goes to Clemson. Etienne, not Etienne. Okay, yeah, that should tell you how much I know about college football at the moment and how much I watch. I'll be able to tell you more when I watch more in the off season when I do the draft breakdown.
And all that matters is that you once it's time, you get to paying attention about them. That is really all that counts.
Yeah.
But
that's all I care about. I care about if they're going to translate to the NFL.
In any case, we talked about the running backs there. James Conner is obviously their best. And as far as the offensive line goes, with a couple of replacements, notably Marquise Pouncey subbed out for J.C. Hassenauer, I thought they did a pretty good job. Only gave up the 1 sack, which was more on Rudolph than anything. And they ran the ball well against a pretty much intact Browns defensive line, at least early on. Now, I know that they were missing several of their run stoppers on the back end and a linebacker, but considering where this ground game has been, I want to give them huge props, and I thought they did a good job, aside from a few plays, on protecting Mason Rudolph in this game.
It's kind of off topic, but we kind of already talked about it, but I just remembered it. The one thing I want to point out in this game that was bothering me is we saw a return on the defensive side of scheming a linebacker up against a wide receiver. More than once, Avery Williamson was put up against Jarvis Landry, and when we've talked about Avery Williamson being a great run stopper, but a not good at all coverage guy, that is unideal. You can't be having a inside linebacker on wide receiver 1. It's just not any linebacker. Sorry, let me rephrase that. Any linebacker on wide receiver 1 is no bueno. I don't even really like linebackers on wide receiver 2, but sometimes it just has to work out that way due to blitzing and stuff. Depending on how you're doing it, but you have to account for Jarvis Landry. You have to respect him a little bit more than putting Avery Williamson on that man. And that's just something I wanted to point out. I know it's off topic, but I literally just remembered it now.
One thing to point out is that part of the reason why the Steelers are having trouble with coverage issues is that the Browns did in this game what the Patriots did for years against the Steelers, where they'd come in with 2 tight end heavy personnel and then they'd spread them out. And that forces you to have to drop linebackers into coverage to try to cover these guys. And it makes it a little more predictable where you're probably going to have to use drop zones. And if you're using man coverage, you're putting guys like TJ Watt in on coverage against guys like Austin Hooper. That's not a favorable position. So I'd be on the lookout for that, especially with Harrison Bryant possibly returning for this game. You could have 3 capable tight ends for the Browns in this game, which means you could see a lot of mismatches in this game. But there's not much the defense can do. If you don't do that, if you instead swap out for lighter personnel, you're going to get run on. And if you keep in the heavier personnel, you have to cover. So it's kind of a pick your own poison at this point.
Yeah, it's tough. You got to hope that they've practiced against it and hopefully learned their lesson and found a way to combat them taking the 2 tight end set and spreading it out.
Indeed. Let's talk about the receivers. Deontay Johnson's usually been the rhythm type receiver, the guy that gets most of the volume every week. This week it was Chase Claypool. He had the most targets of the group this week, but most of the receivers were contributing in this one. James Washington was kind of quiet. Obviously, Eric Ebron did not play. Vance McDonald had half of his season total receptions in this game. I thought he played pretty well. Overall, a good day for the receivers. I think only a couple drops, one by James Washington and another by number 3 tight end Kevin Rader.
There was also a drop by Vance McDonald, too. His one incompletion. Overall, receivers I think played well. Deontay Johnson had a very good game. I mean, he recorded a 96-yarder, 3-reception game. It was really nice. And then we had Juju having a touchdown. The ball was spread. The ball was definitely spread in this game. We had 4 different guys with 5 or more catches. So that's honestly pretty good. I know that one of those is a running back, but regardless, I think that overall the team did well in that regard. In receiving regard, Chase Claypool records another 101 game, and his one touchdown was really solid. It was kind of crazy, actually. I shouldn't say solid. It was crazy. He had just dropped the pass before, which honestly I put that one on Rudolph, but that's arguable. I just thought it was outside the catch radius, too far out of bounds. Regardless, the very next play, he runs to the end zone on 4th down and catches it between a defender's hands. So, honestly, really great touchdown from him. Overall, great game.
Do you disagree with the fact that he hasn't been playing a lot lately because of concerns of hitting the rookie wall?
Yes and no. I think that he should be playing more, but I feel like also we have the capable wide receivers to take him off. For a while, Deontay Johnson was worrisome, but he's pulled it back. Deontay Johnson, I don't think I've had a problem with him for at least 2 or 3 games now. He's kind of lost that drop problem for the moment. It could change at any time, but at the moment, I would love to see more Claypool. But if they're really worried about him hitting the rookie wall, if they think they're going to wear him out, it might be best to hold him out and just let him play into playoffs a little bit more. He gets there and hope that he doesn't collect a wear and tear there. That's kind of how I feel.
Let's go to the other side of the ball, shall we? The defensive line had 2 of its 3 starters on the line in Stephon Tuitt and Tyson Alualu. They both played 50-plus snaps. And only a little bit of time for guys like Henry Mondeau, Carlos Davis, and Isaiah Buggs. There was a scrap between Buggs and Davis on the sideline on Sunday. And a decent amount of Chris Wormley, who had a really good game. Again, I think the Browns ran the ball too well, and it's concerning that the starting nose tackle and left end were on the field probably a lot more than they should have been.
Yeah, it wasn't very good to risk them like you did. It's really almost inexplicable because you have Carlos Davis and Isaiah Buggs to play, and you activated them, but they played a combined 16 snaps. Before we started the podcast, I was theorizing that it's literally because they thought that they got punished. You know, also punished to it in regard to playing a meaningless game, and Tyson Alualu for that matter. Tyson Alualu is he's not a young guy anymore. He's older for the NFL standards. I think it would have been good especially with the season he's been having, let him sit and let Carlos Davis just play. I don't really know what the thought process there. It's getting up there in age, not quite as old as Alualu yet, but you still didn't need to play those guys as much as you did. I mean, maybe they felt like they had a chance at winning this, but honestly, going into the half, wasn't it already 17-3?
To 6. It was
10-6.
It was 10-6.
Okay, no, that game was still realistic. Okay. So, I mean, maybe they really wanted to try and eliminate the Browns from the playoffs, which I understand, but I don't know. I feel like saving your really good players that still had to play you had players available is a bad foresight. I mean, the Steelers are lucky they escaped with no injuries to either of those guys, but still, it was kind of unnecessary.
Indeed. Alex Highsmith, man, that's a guy that's getting better every week, isn't he?
He is. We went off about him last week being so good already. Like, he's ahead of where Bud Dupree was in his rookie season. Obviously not better than Bud Dupree now, but he's ahead of where Bud Dupree was. And as a third-round pick from a small school, or smaller school, I should say, it's really impressive. And he's literally just all over. For an outside linebacker, he gets around. He really, really good. He got a sack in this game. Just overall, so far, more than advertised in his rookie season.
Yeah, he's definitely been. I mean, we've talked about this a lot, even last week too. That he is. I wasn't in favor of the Steelers picking him because I thought he was going to go earlier than he did, and because to me he was more of a toolsy long-term project guy, which I thought, okay, maybe that'll work, but I was concerned about immediate impact, especially when Bud Dupree went down. But like you said, he's far and away ahead of where anyone expected him to be. He's got the tools in the tool bag right now, and now it's just a matter of perfecting them. And you want to get him to get stronger, but I think in terms of getting a guy off the bench, you won't find many non-starters at the start of the season playing better than he is right now. And that's just been really nice for the defense to have. On the rest of the defense, there were some subs in, some good play from Cameron Sutton, not so nice play from guys like Justin Lane. We had the bad play by Minkah Fitzpatrick, but he also broke up a pass in the end zone. The rest of the defense, just an okay day?
Yeah, I feel like overall they just okay. Chris Wormley got a sack in this game. Cameron Sutton did okay. Yeah, honestly, that's I was about to say something, but it was special teams. J-Ron Elliott played pretty well, I thought, too.
Yeah, he ended up with a sack for the first time since, I believe, he was with the Packers back in 2016. So it's been a while since he's had a sack. But yeah, him, that's the thing, is they still got pressure on Baker Mayfield in this game without guys like Watt and Hayward, which I think was very encouraging going forward.
Yeah, I feel like the run game maybe suffered a little bit, but the pass rush was still there. I don't know if it's just the players, but I think Keith Butler plays a big role in that because his pass rush has always been good. Steelers just set a record, too. They're the only team in NFL history to lead the NFL in sacks and for 4 straight seasons, and I think a lot of that goes to Keith Butler as well as the player execution with pass rush and blitz schemes. So it's become what we're accustomed to with these guys.
And not to mention that sack streak, I believe, is now at 73 straight games with at least one sack?
Yeah, gunning for 100. That's what I'm hoping for.
Yeah, I mean, they've been able to get pressure a lot of times without sending the blitz, but they like to do it too. It's just been a defense that, even without Bud Dupree and Devin Bush for a decent part of this season, I still think that it's one of the best in the NFL. And I still think it's probably good enough to help the Steelers win a championship this year.
Oh, easily. They're still in it.
And that's the thing you have to remember about defense in today's NFL is that it's just all the offensive numbers are inflated beyond belief. But there's a lot of guys that showed out in this game, and remember they only had 2 outside linebackers active for this game, with Highsmith and Adaney. They had 3 with Elliott. I take that back. But they were down Cassius Marsh in this game too.
Yeah, because of Ronies.
Anything else in terms of offense and defense related?
No.
What do you think about having Kevin Rader potentially active to help with the ground game? Because he's obviously a better blocker than Eric Ebron.
It could be something that happens, for sure. He also, what's interesting about him is not as a blocker. That's not where I thought you were going, because when you said we're done with offense and defense, he also provides special teams abilities. He had 3 tackles in this game on special teams. That's honestly pretty impressive too. Or Solo, a guy that's really not gotten the chance to do so this year. I was impressed with that. So I think that he could be a guy that's made active, especially if you're seeing guys like Carlos Davis and Isaiah Buggs not getting snaps on a regular base in a game where you have most of your starters down, and you're trying to rest guys. I think you could afford to make one inactive to help the offense, which is struggling a lot more. It probably has to rely on rotational guys to add a guy that's going to give you better blocking and also some special teams help. It's just how I view it.
In terms of the special teams game, not a ton to talk about, although Matthew Wright again was perfect in this game. Jordan Berry, another solid game punting, and obviously there was that onside kick, which came very close to being recovered by the Steelers.
Yeah, no, that was, that felt like it was going to be recovered by Pittsburgh. I thought it really was. He had to sit on it. Yeah, it was close. The one thing I'll say is, the Steelers could be thinking about Matthew Wright for next year, but you see his leg strength on the kickoffs. The kickoffs are what really bother me. That ball does not get very far down the field. And one of those, I guess it worked out, because one of the ones that were so short, it ended up in Andy Yanovic's hands, the fullback, on the kick return. But, his Wright just is not... I feel like going forward, he can't be a starting guy. For the kickoffs is just really, really scary to me. He's asking teams to house it. That's what I see. The field goals, really solid. He definitely has a cap at 50, but honestly, if you're going to stay almost basically perfect at under 50, I'm cool with that. It's just the kickoffs, man. The kickoffs are tough.
So let's turn the page now to Steelers and Browns Part 3. Any initial thoughts on the way this game is going right now with Kevin Stefanski? We'll get into this all in the preview podcast, but Kevin Stefanski not going to be available. Joel Bitonio, the offensive lineman, Kaderil Hodge is going to be out, the receiver. There could be potentially more added to that list with being placed on the COVID-19 reserve list. So there's still a lot to be determined, but right now, how do you feel about this playoff game hosting the Cleveland Browns?
I feel pretty good. I feel with all that's going on with the Browns right now, and the Steelers are going to be bringing their starters back for this game, I think that I feel pretty solid, because it's a lot of turnover, a lot of turnover. It's not just the guys that got sad. We're out without Terrell Edmonds, we're out Eric Ebron, those starters that weren't supposed to sit but just had an injury and one was placed on the COVID list. A lot is going to change going into this game, and I think that it looks good for the Steelers. It looks pretty good.
And on another good bit of news, we will try to be having John Gehring back on our show to talk about Steelers and Browns for the 3rd time this year. So hopefully I am tired. Hopefully John can oblige us and give us a shot here on the podcast, as we had him on earlier this week and again earlier this season as well. Always appreciate it when he can come on, so we'll be in contact with him as we look ahead to the wild card game. You want to get ahead to looking at what happened in the final week of the NFL regular season?
Sure, we could look at it.
So starting with that Dolphins-Bills game, the Dolphins, the team that ended up missing out in the AFC playoffs, all they had to do was win, but they struggled mightily against the Bills, who played their backups for significant portions of this game. The Bills just poured it on, 56-26 in this game, in a game that never really felt quite that close. Although it's interesting to note, it was, I believe, a 3-0 Dolphins lead at one point before the Bills scored 4 straight touchdowns.
Yeah, the game was competitive for a little bit, and then the Bills just took off. The Dolphins weren't able to get back in it.
Another game like that, the Ravens and Bengals, 404 rushing yards from Baltimore. That's a team I think a lot of people in Pittsburgh are glad the Steelers will not have to face.
Yeah, that would have been an awful first game. I'm really, really glad the Steelers don't have to face them. It's going to be a tough game between them and the Titans. It's going to be a fun one.
Not a lot to mention with these next two games. Vikings beat the Lions 37-35, and the Patriots beat the Jets 28-14. Four teams that are out of the playoff picture. Do you have any extra comment?
Nothing really interesting about those games. No, I didn't watch either of them.
Cowboys at Giants, the winner of the game would potentially win the NFC East based on what happened with Washington. It was the Giants who came away victorious, but it was a very ugly-looking game. Both teams finished at 6-10.
Yep, I don't really have much to say about that game either. I didn't watch it. I can't say.
I know you're going to have something to say about this game. The Buccaneers secure the number 5 seed in the NFC playoffs by sweeping the Atlanta Falcons 44-27, but they did lose Mike Evans at least for the time being with a leg injury, and he could be out potentially numerous weeks as we approach the playoffs quickly.
Yeah, nuking Mike Evans was not ideal. I know that you had to play your wide receivers, but I don't know why you subject Mike Evans to that. I feel like you play a lot more Antonio Brown and a lot more Scotty Miller. Heck do I know, I guess. But they are hopeful for Mike Evans. They think that he might play this week, which is very fortunate for them. But if this wasn't a playoff game, I don't know if he plays. Like, it's literally, I think he's pushing for it because it's a playoff game. And Mike Evans has yet to taste the playoffs in his Buccaneers career. He's never seen it. So, like, he's probably anxious to go, and he's probably going to push himself through injury to get into this game, which is still not ideal. The point is, Buccaneers shouldn't have put him in this situation.
That's wild to think about that he's been in the league for 6 years now, and this could be his first playoff game.
Yeah. The way loyalty works sometimes.
A guy who's going back to the playoffs again, but only being the first seed in the NFC playoffs for only the second time in his career, Aaron Rodgers and the Packers thoroughly defeat the Chicago Bears, who are able to slip into the playoffs based on a loss by the Arizona Cardinals. So it's kind of a win at the end of the day for both teams, but the Packers clearly better than the Bears, and Mitchell Trubisky's hot run ends with a cold day in Chicago.
Yeah, it really hurts for Miami. Just looking at the other side, seeing a Nate team making it into the playoffs, and then you look at the Rams too, and the Rams are 10-6, and you're just chilling as the also 10-6, and you're like, nah, I don't make it because I was on the better side. Yeah. The Bears aren't very good, and the Packers, I'm not surprised they got the 1 seed. They're a much better team. Last year it feels because Aaron Rodgers is playing at a really high level again. And I know we were talking about it before the podcast, but the wide receiver, the Packers would be a so much better team if they decide not to be petty and actually draft a wide receiver to help, because they're nasty right now in offense. But imagine their offense with Michael Pittman or E. Higgins, who went like a few picks after Jordan Love. Just would have been disgusting. I'm fairly confident that they would be Super Bowl favorites if that happened instead.
You were mentioning records. Did you know that this is the first time since 1987 that there hasn't been a single team that finished with a record of 9-7 this year?
Really? What an odd thing, because we're never going to see 9-7 ever again.
Well,
next year.
I was going to say, assuming they're picking up that 17th game, which has not been confirmed just yet, from what I can tell.
Yeah, honestly, that's super strange.
The only reason it was in 87, too, is because it was a strike-shortened year. They only played 15 games instead of 16.
Gotcha.
Raiders at Broncos, nothing really to report here. Jerry Jeudy is a beast, though. He had a 92-yard touchdown reception, but otherwise 2 teams that will be enjoying the playoffs from the couch.
Not Devonta Smith, though.
Yeah, so how about that? Your boy wins the Heisman.
I could see wide receiver talent with my eyes closed. I know where it's at.
The first wide receiver to win the Heisman Award since 1991. How about that?
Yeah, pretty crazy. Honestly, pretty crazy. I didn't think that was going to happen. I obviously pointed out when I was watching Tua tape that my favorite wide receiver was Devonta Smith. I didn't foresee him winning a Heisman. That's pretty hard to foresee when it hasn't happened in over 20 years. Well over 20 years.
Rarefied air for sure. Rarefied air for the Jacksonville Jaguars, who have acquired the number 1 overall pick. They gave the Indianapolis Colts a good fight, but the Colts were able to break away and won 28-14, securing their playoff bid after needing help from the Dolphins to lose. And a big day from Jonathan Taylor, 253 yards on the ground and 2 touchdowns.
Yeah, honestly, the Colts just barely covered to our standards. In Vegas, we would have been right, but this isn't Vegas. We are actually both wrong on this game, picking the Jaguars plus the 14 points.
The Justin Herbert-led Chargers defeat the Chad Henne-led Chiefs. Herbert caps off a historic rookie season by throwing over 30 touchdowns, and the Chiefs coast into the playoffs with their first-round bye. I think Justin Herbert is just the guy the Chargers have been looking for, and I'll be very interested to see how his career unfolds over the next few seasons.
Hey, he looks very good. Also, Justin Jackson played pretty well in that game. He ran, I think, 9 times for 72 yards. So he played really, really well as well.
2 NFC West teams needing to try to make the playoffs needing to try to win in order to make the playoffs. The Rams get the better of the Cardinals by winning 18-7, eliminating the Cardinals, and former AAF legend John Walford at the helm for the Rams has a pretty nice day. Wasn't sexy in terms of the numbers that he put up, but he did enough to get the Rams back into the playoffs again.
Yeah, that was pathetic from the Cardinals. Like, I know Kyler Murray got hurt and they had to play Chris Streveler for a lot of the game. I don't know. I felt like it's kind of tough to say because, I mean, without Kyler Murray, what are the Cardinals? And I guess I had to give them a little bit of a pass for that because the Rams' defense isn't a pushover. The Rams' defense is really good. They have really good pieces. They're statistically really well rated. I think that they have the best defensive NEA in the entire NFL. I think at 4.6, just below the Steelers, who are at 4.7. So they're a really good defensive team. So I don't know how much heat I should give the Cardinals, but I don't know. Without Cooper Kupp, I guess I got to be more mad at the Cardinals' defense or what they did. No Cooper Kupp, starting John Wolford, I felt like they should have been better.
Are the Cardinals the same team as in the NFC that the Raiders are in the AFC, or do they compare more closely to the Dolphins, in your opinion?
I think the Cardinals are the Cardinals. I think that they're different from both teams because I don't think with Miami there's a quarterback question. With the Raiders it's kind of like the same thing. Derek Carr is like they don't know if he's like solidified there. I don't know what's going on with Derek Carr. Like every other week it's like he's really great. Like oh no he's overthrowing guys. But where the Cardinals stand, I think they'll be better going into next year. I think that they can get over the hump next year. I mean, you think that they're 8-8 without one of the most underrated pass rushers in the league. They lost him pretty early. I can't think of his name. You know what I'm talking about.
Oh, Chandler Jones.
Chandler Jones. I don't know why I couldn't think of that. But yeah, they're without Chandler Jones for most of this year. I think that they get better going to next year, and they can, draft maybe a wide receiver, draft maybe offensive lineman, maybe defensive lineman. I think that they're going to be good going forward.
The 49ers gave the Seahawks a good run for their money in this one, but Tyler Lockett with 2 touchdowns in the second half or in the fourth quarter, actually, from Russell Wilson to rally the Seahawks to the number 3 seed. Are they the number 3 seed?
The Seahawks, yeah, the Seahawks are the 3 seed.
So the Seahawks, after having this easy schedule set up at the end of the year, a chance for Russell Wilson to get back into the MVP conversation, kind of disappointed. The Seahawks offense, ironically enough, is now in the tank, and the defense has been helping to carry the team, and it happened again in this one.
Yeah, they're pretty solid against the run. I don't know if that's because a lot of teams are just choosing to pass on them, but statistically they're one of the best in yards per game allowed in the rush yards department. Yeah, overall, I don't know why I do this to myself. I literally say the NFC West is weird. I still choose not to pick the underdog to cover. And it comes to bite me. I literally said it for both the Cardinals and Rams game and the Seahawks and 49ers. And both times, the weird team won in that game. So I don't know why I do this to myself. I subjected myself to this own punishment.
Listen to yourself, buddy.
I don't know how, apparently.
The Saints bludgeoned the Panthers. 5 interceptions from Panthers quarterbacks in this one. The Panthers were a scrappy team there for a while. I think they were 3-3, but ultimately they're lacking in talent in just too many areas.
Yeah, they were overachieving in the beginning. It was surprising. It's like, oh, maybe they're better than we think. And then they just aren't there. Granted, a big portion of that is because their best offensive player was out for like literally 90% of the year. But still, they don't have a lot of talent other than Christian McCaffrey, so they have a lot to work on going into the offseason.
The Houston Texans lost in kind of humiliating fashion to the Tennessee Titans, who claimed the AFC South with a 41-38 victory, just narrowly avoiding overtime after the Texans allowed what was essentially a Hail Mary attempt near the end of regulation. And 250 more yards from Derrick Henry on the ground. Deshaun Watson, another great day wasted. 4-12 on the season for the Texans, and we can talk about it more on the next podcast, but Watson is not happy with the Texans.
Yeah. Honestly, the Titans' entire offense revolves around A.J. Brown and Derrick Henry. Like, that's it. And it's funny, teams can't stop them. They're just that good, each of them in their own right. So 400 of the yards from the Titans from one of those players. Overall, got closer game than expected, but Titans win nonetheless.
So let's set the scene now for Sunday night football. We have the Washington football team and the Philadelphia Eagles. Philadelphia was in position to win this game. They were down 17-14 in this game, and we all know what happened. Doug Peterson made the curious decision to bench Jalen Hurts for Nate Sudfeld, and the Eagles go on to lose the game. There's a bunch of people talking about the Eagles intentionally tanking, and I don't know, we can have that discussion if you want, but a huge story being made about it because the Giants missed the playoffs as a result. Where do you stand on this whole tanking situation and your moral and ethical standings as far as how you think about this type of play?
Before the game kicked off, they said that Nate Sudfeld was likely to play. There is questions to that. One thing I'm going to raise is that Jalen Hurts was 7-20 on the day. Like let's not pretend like Jalen Hurts was absolutely dishing. He finished with a literally almost identical completion percentage as Nate Sudfeld. Sudfeld was 5 for 12. He was 7 for 20. You know, it's pretty relatively close. Each threw an interception, none threw a touchdown. So I mean, I don't know. I don't know why people think that keeping Jalen Hurts would have won the game when he was literally 7 for 20, under 50% passing completion percentage. So this is, I guess that's where I stand. I stand that I don't really care, but I just don't think that they did anything terrible because they said, one, before the game started that they wanted to play Nate Sudfeld. Two, Jalen Hurts wasn't playing great in this game. It didn't even matter. Three, the Giants need to play better and get more than 6 wins in a season if they want to go to the playoffs. I don't. You win more games, control your own destiny, and then that'll help you out a little bit. Getting a 500 record would be a good start to things.
Yeah, I have zero sympathy for a team complaining about what other teams do when they only won 6 games. In every other division, that team would have been eliminated weeks ago. So I have a big problem with the fact that the Giants are making a big deal about it. And I think that part of it is that it's New York. And I think that if this was happening to another team, like if it were New York that had pulled starters, I don't think we'd be hearing nearly as much about it.
A big thing is that it was New York. It was Sunday Night Football, so it was on display for everyone to see. I don't know. If they didn't say that they were going to start Sudfeld, I'd get it. They were literally talking about doing that. They wanted to evaluate their players. It is tanking to evaluate your backup guys, but honestly, again, looking at the statistics, Jalen Hurts 7 for 20. That's what you were going to rely on. No touchdowns thrown. You were going to rely on that to win you the game. That was going to make the difference. That was going to have the Eagles win the game instead. All right.
Yeah, they, I don't know. I think we could talk a long time about it, but I think we share a pretty similar viewpoint on it, which is, just Giants just control their own destiny, and the Eagles, I mean, why should, even if they were intentionally, assuming they're intentionally tanking, why shouldn't they try to improve their draft stock?
Yeah, there's no incentive not to. Other than pride, I guess.
You also have the potential to upset your team, but I mean that team was a dumpster fire anyways. They were 4-10-1.
Yeah, exactly.
The one thing I will say is that if players are upset, you might have a harder time attracting free agents too. But I think that's stretching it a little bit.
Yeah.
So, all right. Well, that concludes Week 17. The scene is set for the wild card playoff round, and we'll get to that next time, right?
Yeah, hopefully.
Indeed. So hopefully we will have John Gehring back on the podcast, but in the meantime, if you have any questions about the show, please feel free to email us at strongerthansteelpodcast@gmail.com. Check out our website, strongerthansteelnfl.blogspot.com. You can find our episodes posted on YouTube and SoundCloud under the name Stronger Than Steel Podcast. Austin, thanks for joining me again tonight, buddy, and I hope you enjoy your day as we get ready to talk about Steelers and Browns again for the third time this year and for the second consecutive week with our buddy John. So until next time, thank you for listening to the Stronger Than Steel podcast.
Bye.
You have been listening to Stronger Than Steel podcast. Thank you for joining us today, and don't forget to check out our website listed in the description below.